The Zevrathi Dominion collapsed faster than anyone expected within 6 months of Earth's victory. 43 worlds declared independence. The empire that had ruled for 3 centuries was falling apart. Not through military conquest, but through the simple act of subject species refusing to obey. On Krelver 3, the mining world that had been first to rebel, workers watched Zevrathi garrison troops board the last transport ships. They were leaving, not because they had been defeated in battle, but because the Dominion could no longer supply or support them, were free, a Krelvorian miner said. Still not quite believing it, his companion nodded. Because of the humans on Earth, the rebuilding had begun. It would take decades to repair the damage. Entire cities needed to be reconstructed. Ecosystems needed healing. The population had been reduced by nearly 2 billion. But humanity was resilient. General Chen, now promoted to commander of Terran Defense Forces, sat in a temporary command center and reviewed requests for assistance. They came from all over former Dominion space, species asking for help, for technology, for military support against Zevrathi holdouts. We can't help everyone, her aide said. We barely have resources for ourselves. Chen looked at the list. Dozens of species, hundreds of worlds, all looking to humanity for leadership. We didn't start this war to become conquerors, she said. But we can't abandon them either. She made a decision that would define humanity's role in galactic politics for generations. Send a message to all species that have requested aid, she ordered. Tell them we're willing to share technology and provide military advisors, but we will not rule them. We will not build an empire. What we will do is help them build a coalition. A real alliance of free peoples. The proposal was revolutionary. Never in galactic history had a victorious species offered partnership instead of domination. The response was overwhelming. Within weeks, representatives from 37 different species arrived at Earth. They met in a temporary assembly hall built in the ruins of Geneva. The Galactic Coalition was born, not an empire, not a dominion, but a true alliance where each species had equal voice. The first order of business was dealing with the remaining Zevrathi forces. They still controlled several core systems, still commanded significant military assets, but they were scattered, demoralized, and facing rebellions on every front. We should destroy them, a Krelvorian delegate argued. Make sure they can never threaten anyone again. No, said the human ambassador. A former diplomat named Sarah Kim, if we annihilate them, we become what they were. Instead, we offer them a choice. The message sent to the remaining Zevrathi leadership was simple. Surrender. Join the coalition as equal members. Or face continued war, the Zevrathi Council. What remained of it, debated for 3 days. Pride warred with practicality. Some wanted to fight to the last. Others saw the writing on the wall. In the end, pragmatism won. The Zevrathi surrendered. Not to humanity alone, but to the coalition. They were required to disarm their military to defensive levels only. Required to pay reparations to the species they had conquered. Required to share all their technology freely. It was a bitter pill, but it was survival, and slowly, grudgingly, the Zevrathi began to integrate into the new galactic order. Not as masters, but as equals. Humanity's role in the coalition was unique. They were not the leaders, but they were the heart. Every species looked to Earth as proof that freedom was worth fighting for, and humanity took that responsibility seriously. Human engineers traveled to dozens of worlds, teaching advanced technologies. Human military advisors helped former subject species build their own defense forces. Human diplomats mediated disputes and helped forge new alliances. But they never conquered, never ruled, never demanded tribute or obedience. It was so alien to galactic politics that many species didn't understand it at first. Why do you help us? An Azathian diplomat asked Sarah Kim. You won the war. You could rule the entire sector. We didn't fight for power, Kim replied. We fought for freedom. Our freedom and everyone else's. Taking power would betray everything we fought for. The coalition grew. New species joined. Some had never been part of the Dominion. They came because they saw something in humanity's vision. A galaxy where cooperation replaced domination, where diversity was strength. where no species would ever again face conquest alone. It wasn't perfect. There were disputes, conflicts, disagreements, but they were resolved through dialogue and compromise, not through force. 5 years after the war's end, a monument was unveiled in Earth orbit. The wreckage of Warmick's flagship had been preserved, turned into a memorial. Representatives from every coalition species attended the ceremony. General Chen, now retired but still influential, gave the dedication speech. "This monument serves 2 purposes," she said. "First, it honors those who died, human and alien alike. The Zevrathi soldiers who followed orders they shouldn't have, the humans who sacrificed everything to protect their home, all the species caught in the middle. Second, it serves as a warning." She paused, looking at the assembled delegates. "This is what happens when one species tries to dominate others. This is the cost of empire. This is why we built the coalition on principles of equality and mutual respect. Let this wreck remind us all." Never again, the assembled delegates echoed her words. Never again, but Chen wasn't finished. "There's a third purpose," she said. "This monument is a message to anyone out there who might think about trying what the Zevrathi tried." Her voice hardened. "Earth is not yours to take. It never was. It never will be. And now Earth doesn't stand alone. Attack one coalition world, and you attack all of us. We will defend each other with the same fury humanity showed in defending its home." The message was broadcast across known space. A warning and a promise. The coalition would not be aggressors, but they would never be victims again. Humanity's influence on galactic culture went beyond politics and military matters. Human art, music, literature spread across coalition space. The concept of democracy, refined over millennia of human history, was adopted by many species. Human approaches to science, emphasizing experimentation and creative thinking over rigid methodology, revolutionized research, but perhaps most importantly, humanity taught the galaxy something it had forgotten. Hope, the idea that things could change, that the oppressed could defeat oppressors, that a better future was possible if you were willing to fight for it. On a distant world called Terra, a young student studied Earth history. She had been born after the war. The Dominion was just a story to her, something from the past, but she was fascinated by humanity. Why did they fight so hard? She asked her teacher. The teacher, an old Theraxian who remembered the Dominion years, smiled. "Because they understood something fundamental," he said. "Some things are worth dying for. Freedom, home, the right to determine your own future." The Zevrathi forgot that. They thought everyone would choose survival over freedom. Humanity showed them they were wrong. The student thought about that. Could we do the same? If someone tried to conquer us? The teacher nodded yes, because humanity taught us how. Not just the tactics or the technology, but the spirit, the refusal to surrender. The determination to be free, that's humanity's real gift to the galaxy. 50 years after the war, Earth had been rebuilt. New cities rose from the ruins. More beautiful than before, the scars remained. Museums preserved the devastation. Parks memorialized the dead, but life had returned. On the anniversary of the war's end, now called Liberation Day throughout coalition space, Sarah Kim addressed a gathering in New Geneva. She was old now, one of the last surviving members of humanity's war generation. "I'm often asked if it was worth it," she said. "If the cost was too high. 2 billion humans died. Countless aliens on both sides. Earth was devastated. The trauma scarred a generation." She paused, looking out at the crowd, humans and aliens together. Children playing without fear, scientists collaborating freely, artists sharing their visions. "Yes," she said. "It was worth it. Not because we won, not because we built an empire, but because we proved something important. We proved that freedom matters. More than survival, we proved that courage can overcome superior force. We proved that unity is stronger than domination, and we proved that the human spirit, once roused, is unstoppable." The crowd erupted in cheers, human and alien voices blending together. In the century that followed, the coalition flourished. New species were contacted and invited to join. Technology advanced rapidly through cooperation, conflicts were resolved peacefully. And throughout it all, Earth remained the moral center. Not through power, but through example. The story of humanity's war became legend, passed down through generations, studied in schools across hundreds of worlds, and the lesson was clear. Never underestimate those who fight for their homes. Never assume technological superiority means victory. Never forget that the strongest force in the universe isn't energy weapons or faster-than-light drives. It's the will to be free, on Earth, in the rebuilt city of Geneva. A simple plaque stands in Coalition Plaza. It's written in every language spoken in Coalition space. And it says, "Here, representatives of free peoples gather." The warning came from an Azathian intelligence operative deep in Dominion space. "They are coming," the encrypted message said. All of them. General Chen stared at the data streaming across her screens. 347 Zevrathi warships, the largest fleet ever assembled in this sector, all converging on Earth. "How long do we have?" she asked. 72 hours, her tactical officer replied. 3 days to prepare for the end of the world. Chen activated the emergency broadcast system. Every screen on Earth lit up with her face. "People of Earth," she began, "I won't lie to you. The Zevrathi are coming with everything they have. They mean to destroy us. Not conquer us anymore, destroy us. We have 3 days." She paused. "Letting that sink in 3 days, we will face the largest military force in known space. We will probably lose around the world." People watched in silence. Families held each other. Soldiers checked their weapons. Scientists worked frantically on last-minute miracles. "But," Chen continued, her voice hardening, "we will make them pay for every inch. We will fight them in space, in orbit, in our streets, in our homes, and if Earth falls, we will make sure the galaxy remembers what happened here. We'll show every species in the Dominion what it costs to attack humanity." They wanted a war. Let's give them one they'll never forget. The evacuation began immediately. Not a surrender, but a contingency. Colony ships hastily prepared, loaded with children and genetic samples and the accumulated knowledge of humanity. If Earth fell, the species would survive. Somewhere out there among the stars, humanity would endure, but the vast majority stayed. Every person capable of holding a weapon was armed. Every city became a fortress. Every building a potential bunker in orbit. Admiral Park assembled what remained of Earth's fleet. 47 ships against 347. "We can't win a straight fight," his second-in-command said. "Then we won't fight straight," Park replied. The human fleet dispersed throughout the solar system. Not in formation, but scattered, hidden among asteroids and debris. They would hit and run, ambush, and fade. Make the Zevrathi hunt for every ship on Earth's moon. Weapons that violated every principle of civilized warfare were being prepared. Humanity had spent months reverse engineering Zevrathi technology. But they had also been developing their own innovations. Weapons based on theories that rational scientists called impossible. Experimental devices that had a 50% chance of destroying the user. But desperate times called for desperate measures. The Zevrathi fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the solar system. Vormix stood on his bridge and surveyed the tactical display. "This is it," he said to his crew. "Today we end the human threat once and for all." He opened a channel to all ships. "Warriors of the Dominion," he said, "these humans have embarrassed us. They have killed our soldiers, destroyed our ships, and inspired rebellion across our empire. Today we show the galaxy what happens to those who defy us. Burn that world. Leave nothing alive." 347 ships accelerated toward Earth, the largest armada in Dominion history. Enough firepower to crack a planet. They detected the human fleet almost immediately. "Scattered and hiding, but present, destroy them first," Wormick ordered. "Then we deal with the planet." The Zevrathi task forces split off to hunt down human ships. That was their first mistake. The moment the Zevrathi divided their forces, the humans struck. A Zevrathi destroyer, pursuing a human frigate through an asteroid field, suddenly found itself surrounded. Dozens of one-man fighters emerged from hiding. They swarmed the destroyer like angry wasps. Its shields held against the first few attacks. But the fighters carried something new: quantum destabilizers. Weapons that didn't just drain shields, but made them collapse catastrophically. The destroyer's shields failed. Then its hull was torn apart by conventional missiles. The pattern repeated across the solar system. The Zevrathi, confident in their superior numbers, pursued individual human ships and walked into trap after trap, but numbers still mattered. For every Zevrathi ship destroyed, humanity lost 2. The math was brutal. Earth would run out of ships long before the Zevrathi did. Warmick watched his casualties mount with grim satisfaction. They fight well, he admitted, but they cannot win. Continue the advance. The Zevrathi fleet pushed toward Earth. They reached Mars orbit. That's when the second phase of Earth's defense activated. Humanity had spent the last 3 months mining every asteroid in the belt. Not for resources, for weapons. Thousands of asteroids, fitted with simple thrusters and guidance systems, rocks that humanity had turned into missiles. They came at the Zevrathi fleet from every direction. Most were destroyed by defensive fire, but there were too many, and each impact, even if it didn't destroy a ship, damaged it, drained its shields, forced it to divert power to defense. The Zevrathi advance slowed, but it didn't stop on Earth. General Chen watched the tactical display. The Zevrathi fleet was bloodied, but still coming. Deploy the Luna batteries, she ordered. On the moon's far side, massive railguns opened fire. They had been built using a combination of human engineering and stolen Zevrathi technology. Each round traveled at a significant fraction of light speed. The projectiles were too fast for shields to stop, too massive 4-point defense to intercept. 3 Zevrathi capital ships died in the first volley. Warmick stared in disbelief as his flagship's sister ship simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there, the next, debris. Return fire, he ordered. Destroy those installations. Orbital bombardment rained down on the moon. The railgun positions were buried deep, but the sustained fire was overwhelming. One by one they went silent, but they had bought time. And killed a dozen more Zevrathi ships, the fleet reached Earth orbit. Warmick prepared to give the order to commence planetary bombardment. That's when Admiral Park played his final card. The remaining human ships, battered and damaged, suddenly abandoned their guerrilla tactics. They formed up into a single formation and charged directly at the Zevrathi flagship. They're committing suicide, Warmick's tactical officer said. Let them, Warmick replied. But as the human ships closed, they activated systems the Zevrathi had never seen before, weaponized black hole generators. Humanity had taken the theoretical physics of space-time manipulation, combined it with captured Zevrathi gravity technology, and created something that should have been impossible: microscopic black holes. Contained in magnetic fields, launched at enemy ships. The results were catastrophic. Zevrathi vessels simply imploded as the black holes passed through them. Warmick's shields were useless. His armor meant nothing. The laws of physics themselves had become weapons, evasive maneuvers. He screamed, but the human ships kept coming. They were close enough now that ramming was a possibility. And the Zevrathi knew these humans were crazy enough to do it. The flagship's engines flared as it tried to retreat. That's when the third wave hit. From Earth itself, missiles launched. Not conventional missiles. Nuclear weapons. Hundreds of them. Every nuclear warhead humanity had built during centuries of Cold War. Weapons that had been obsolete for decades. Now retrofitted with Zevrathi guidance systems and launched in a massive barrage. The Zevrathi fleet's defensive fire intercepted most of them. But not all. Nuclear fire blossomed across the orbital battle space. And in the chaos, the human fleet struck. Admiral Park's ship, the Indomitable, led the charge. Its hull was breached in a dozen places. Its shields were gone, but its weapons still functioned. And Park aimed them directly at Warmick's flagship. For Earth, he transmitted. Then he fired everything and rammed the flagship. The collision tore both ships apart. Admiral Park died instantly. So did Warmick. The Zevrathi fleet commander's last thought was bitter regret. He should have listened, should have retreated, should have negotiated, but pride had driven him to this. With their flagship destroyed and their commander dead, the Zevrathi fleet fell into chaos. On Earth, General Chen seized the moment. "All forces press the attack," she ordered. "Don't let them regroup the remaining human ships." Pilots who knew they were already dead but fought anyway threw themselves at the disorganized Zevrathi on the ground. Every anti-orbital weapon humanity possessed opened fire. The Zevrathi tried to retreat, but they were surrounded, trapped between the human fleet and the planet's defenses. And they were dying in the end. Only 73 Zevrathi ships escaped. Out of 347, they fled toward the outer system, broadcasting desperate calls for help. Behind them, Earth burned. Orbital bombardment had scarred entire continents. Cities were in ruins. Billions were dead or injured. But humanity had survived, and they had won. In bunkers around the world, people emerged to find their planet damaged, but not destroyed. They had faced the full might of an interstellar empire. And they had won. The cost had been horrific. Earth's fleet was reduced to 11 functional ships. Most major cities were destroyed. The death toll would take months to fully calculate, but they had won. General Chen stood in what remained of her command center and addressed humanity one final time. "We paid a terrible price," she said. "We lost friends, family, homes. But we are still here. The Zevrathi came to destroy us. They failed, and now," she said, her eyes hard. The Zevrathi defenders detected the human fleet immediately, Liddy, 3 vessels rising from Earth's surface. Moving in formation toward the orbital blockade, the Zevrathi officers laughed. 23 primitive ships against a battle group of 140 vessels. It would be a massacre. They were right about the massacre. They were just wrong about who would be massacred. Admiral Park's strategy was simple. The Zevrathi expected a conventional engagement, ships exchanging fire at long range, shields absorbing damage until one side broke. That's how civilized species fought. Humans had never been particularly civilized. All ships. Kamikaze protocol is authorized. Park transmitted, I repeat. Kamikaze protocol is authorized on every human vessel. Crews acknowledged the order. They knew what it meant. Some of them wouldn't be going home. The human ships accelerated toward the Zevrathi line. Not at normal combat speeds, but at maximum thrust, burning fuel at rates that would leave them unable to maneuver. The Zevrathi watched in confusion. "What are they doing?" the Zevrathi fleet commander asked. "They're going to ram us," his tactical officer said in disbelief. "Impossible. No species would sacrifice their ships like that. These ones will." The first human ship, a modified cargo hauler named Defiant, struck a Zevrathi destroyer at full speed. It's improvised. Zevrathi shields collapsed on impact, but the ship's hull, reinforced with stolen alien alloys and filled with high explosives, punched through the destroyer's defenses. Both ships exploded in a ball of nuclear fire. The Zevrathi line erupted in chaos. More human ships barreled toward them. Some were shot down by defensive fire, but others got through. Each impact cost humanity 1 ship, but cost the Zevrathi 2 or 3, and while the Zevrathi were focused on the suicide attacks, the real assault began, hidden among Earth's orbital debris. Small human attack craft had been waiting, pilots and one-man fighters, barely more than engines with weapons strapped on. They activated their stolen Zevrathi cloaking devices and struck the enemy fleet from behind. The fighters couldn't take much damage, but they didn't need to. They targeted ship engines and weapon systems with pinpoint accuracy, then vanished back into the debris field before the Zevrathi could respond. It was guerrilla warfare in space. Everything the humans had learned on the ground, adapted for orbital combat. Admiral Park watched from his command ship as the Zevrathi formation fell apart. "All remaining vessels target their command carrier," he ordered. "Let's cut the head off the snake." The surviving human ships, battered and damaged, concentrated their fire on the massive Zevrathi flagship. Its shields held, but the constant barrage was draining them. "We need to retreat," the Zevrathi fleet commander said. His officers stared at him in shock. Retreat. The Dominion never retreated, Commander. If we stay, we will all die, the tactical officer said quietly. These humans are insane. The Zevrathi fleet began to pull back. Not an organized withdrawal, but a panicked rout. Ships broke formation and fled toward the outer system. Humanity had won its first space battle. At the cost of 14 ships and over 2,000 lives, but they had won. On Earth, the celebrations were brief. General Chen knew this was just the beginning. What's our next move? Her second in command asked. Chen pulled up a star map. It showed Dominion space. With dozens of conquered worlds marked in red, we take the fight to them, she said. We show every species in the Dominion that the Zevrathi can be beaten. In the captured Zevrathi vessel that had become Earth's center for alien technology research, scientists made a breakthrough. We've cracked their faster-than-light communications, a researcher announced. Not just cracked it, we can intercept everything. Everything. Chen asked every military transmission, every supply route, every fleet movement in Dominion space. Chen smiled. Can we forge transmissions? The researcher's eyes widened. You want to impersonate them? I want to cause chaos, Chen said. If we can make their fleets think they're receiving legitimate orders, we can send them to the wrong places, have them fire on each other, turn their own communication network into a weapon. That's brilliant, the researcher said. That's also completely against the rules of warfare. They came to conquer our world, Chen replied. They gave up the right to complain about rules. The next phase of humanity's war began. Not with ships or soldiers, but with information. Forged Zevrathi military orders, sent fleets to respond to non-existent threats. Supply convoys were redirected away from combat zones. Commanders received contradictory instructions that created confusion and distrust. And through it all, humanity's broadcasts continued. Real footage of human victories, smuggled to every corner of Dominion space on Krelver 3. A mining world that had served the Dominion for 2 centuries. Workers watched the transmissions in secret. They saw humans destroying Zevrathi ships, saw human soldiers defeating alien warriors in ground combat, saw a species refusing to surrender despite overwhelming odds. If they can do it, a Krelvorian miner said to his fellows, why can't we? The first uprising began 3 weeks after Earth's orbital victory. Krelvorian workers seized control of their mining facilities. They weren't warriors. They didn't have weapons. But they had tools, and they had numbers. And they had anger. The Zevrathi garrison was overwhelmed in hours. One world wasn't enough to threaten the Dominion, but it was a start. And when news of the Krelvorian rebellion spread, other worlds took notice. Meanwhile, Earth's hybrid fleet was evolving. Every engagement provided new data, new insights. Human engineers were no longer just copying Zevrathi technology. They were improving it. The Zevrathi designed their ships for efficiency and standardization. An engineer explained to Admiral Park, everything is modular. Everything follows the same basic principles that makes them predictable. Park said, exactly. We can design ships specifically to counter their tactics. The second-generation human warships were smaller than Zevrathi vessels, faster, more maneuverable, and armed with weapons that took advantage of every weakness in Zevrathi defenses. They didn't try to overpower enemy shields, they disrupted them. They didn't engage in long-range artillery duels. They closed to knife-fighting range where human reflexes and creativity gave them an edge. Warmick watched his empire crumble from his command ship. The reinforcements had arrived, but they weren't enough. Everywhere the Zevrathi tried to establish control, humans sabotaged their efforts on the ground. Resistance continued to bleed his forces in space. The growing human fleet was becoming genuinely dangerous. And now, other species were rebelling. We should negotiate, his science officer suggested. The Dominion does not negotiate with primitives, Warmick said. These primitives are defeating us, the officer replied. Warmick struck him. It was a sign of how desperate things had become. Violence among Zevrathi officers was unheard of. I will not be the first high prelate to surrender, Warmick said. Then you will be the first to preside over the Dominion's collapse, the science officer said. Holding his face in a daring raid, human special forces infiltrated a Zevrathi forward operating base on Earth's moon. Their target was the Central Intelligence Database. The mission was supposed to be hit and run. Get in, copy the data, get out. But the team leader, a British SAS captain named Morrison, saw an opportunity. Change of plans, he said to his team. We're taking prisoners, sir. One of his soldiers asked. We need someone who can tell us about Dominion fleet movements, strategy. Everything. They captured 3 Zevrathi intelligence officers alive. It was the first time in the war that humans had taken high-value prisoners. The interrogations were careful and professional. Humanity was still trying to maintain some moral high ground, but the information the prisoners provided was invaluable. Fleet dispositions, supply routes, political divisions within the Dominion leadership, and something else, something the Zevrathi had kept secret. There are factions within the Dominion, one prisoner explained. Not all species support the conquests. Some joined because they had no choice. Which species? The interrogator asked. The prisoner provided names. Worlds that had been conquered early in the Dominion's expansion. Species that had lived under Zevrathi rule for so long they had been considered loyal. But loyalty enforced by fear was fragile. General Chen took the information to the Terran Defense Alliance Council. We have an opportunity, she said. We can turn the Dominion against itself. How? The Chinese representative asked. We contact these subjugated species directly, Chen explained. We offer them alliance, technology sharing, military support. We're barely holding Earth, the Russian representative said. How can we offer military support to alien worlds? We don't have to actually provide it immediately, Chen said. We just have to make the Zevrathi think we can. Force them to spread their fleets thin, protecting against rebellions. That's devious, the American representative said with approval. That's war, Chen replied. The diplomatic offensive began. Human envoys, traveling in captured Zevrathi ships, made contact with a dozen species. Some refused to even meet, but others listened. They had watched humanity fight for months. They had seen what determination and creativity could accomplish, and they were tired of being slaves. The Azathian collective was the first to formally ally with Earth. They were an aquatic species conquered by the Dominion a century ago. We cannot fight the Zevrathi in open battle, the Azathian ambassador said to the human delegation. The bombardment began on the 3rd Dvornik, had lost patience with the ground assaults that kept disappearing into ambushes and traps. If the humans wanted to hide, he would flush them out. Kinetic bombardment was simple and effective. Drop heavy objects from orbit at high velocity and let physics do the rest. The first targets were military installations that Earth's governments had been foolish enough to leave visible. Or so Wormick thought. The massive tungsten rods fell from the sky like the wrath of an angry god. They struck Air Force bases in Nevada, military complexes in Siberia, naval yards in Norfolk. The explosions were spectacular, visible from space. Wormick watched with satisfaction as the targeting computer confirmed hits. What he didn't know was that those bases had been evacuated days ago. Humanity had sacrificed empty buildings and obsolete equipment. The real military assets had already been relocated to hidden facilities. Bunkers buried so deep that orbital bombardment was useless. Mobile command centers constantly on the move. Submarines that could launch devastating attacks and disappear beneath the waves. While Wormick celebrated destroying empty targets, humanity's real forces remained untouched. Deploy occupation forces to the bombarded sites, Wormick ordered. Establish control zones and begin pacification of surrounding population centers. The Zevrathi moved into the cities. That's when the real war began. The humans had turned their own cities into killing grounds. In New York, Zevrathi troops advanced through Manhattan, expecting terrified civilians. Instead, they found empty streets. The attack came from above and below simultaneously. Snipers and skyscrapers picked off officers with horrifying accuracy. The subway tunnels erupted as explosives detonated beneath marching columns. And when the Zevrathi tried to use their aerial support, Anti-aircraft missiles fired from rooftops and apartment windows. The aliens had superior armor and energy weapons. But they were fighting an enemy that knew every inch of the terrain. An enemy that had no qualms about destroying their own infrastructure to win. In Moscow, the Zevrathi learned about winter warfare. Russian forces lured them into the outskirts during a blizzard. The aliens' thermal sensors were overwhelmed by the cold. Their shields, designed for energy weapons, did little against good old-fashioned Molotov cocktails thrown from buildings when they tried to retreat. They found the roads blocked, not with military barriers, but with civilian vehicles, concrete blocks, anything the resistance could move. The Zevrathi were picked apart in the snow in Tokyo. The humans used the city's dense infrastructure against them. The aliens found themselves fighting in subway stations, shopping complexes, and narrow alleyways where their larger size became a disadvantage. Every corner could hide an enemy. Every door could conceal a trap. The Japanese self-defense forces had studied every urban warfare manual humanity had ever written. They added their own innovations. In Mumbai, Lagos, Sao Paulo, the pattern repeated. The Zevrathi were superior soldiers in open combat. But humanity refused to give them open combat. Worse, the humans were learning. Every Zevrathi weapon captured was immediately studied. Every piece of armor was analyzed within weeks. Human scientists had figured out the basics of Zevrathi shield technology. They couldn't replicate it yet, but they learned how to disrupt it. Electromagnetic pulse grenades were modified to destabilize alien shields. Suddenly, the Zevrathi's invincibility disappeared. A soldier might have advanced armor, but if a teenager with a homemade EMP device could shut down his shields, he was just as vulnerable as anyone else. Warmick watched his casualty reports with growing horror in 3 weeks of occupation. He had lost more soldiers than in the previous 5 campaigns combined. How is this possible? He demanded of his staff. They are primitives. They are adaptable, High Prelate, his science officer said quietly. More adaptable than any species we have encountered. Adaptable. Warmick's mandibles clicked in anger. They are using their own cities as weapons. They have no regard for their own infrastructure. No, the science officer corrected. They care more about winning than about preserving infrastructure. There is a difference, Warmick didn't want to hear it. Increase the bombardment if they want to hide in their cities. We will level the cities, but that strategy failed too when orbital bombardment intensified. The humans simply evacuated and relocated. They were fighting a mobile war, never staying in one place long enough to be targeted. And while Warmick focused on the ground war, humanity was preparing something he never anticipated. A counterattack in a bunker beneath the Rocky Mountains. Human military leaders gathered around a captured Zevrathi shuttle. It had been shot down over Colorado 3 days ago. The crew had been captured alive. They were being treated well, according to the Geneva Conventions that the Zevrathi had never heard of. But their shuttle was being taken apart piece by piece. We've figured out their propulsion system, a young engineer said, excitement in her voice. It's actually not that complicated once you understand the principles. Can we replicate it? General Chen asked. Given time, yes, the engineer replied. But more importantly, we can modify our existing spacecraft to interface with their technology. Chen smiled. How long? 2 weeks? Maybe 3. You have 1 week, Chen said. Get it done around the world. Similar scenes played out. Human ingenuity, combined with the reckless abandon that came from fighting for survival, produced results that should have been impossible. A species that had barely left its own solar system was reverse engineering. Technology from a civilization thousands of years more advanced. Not through careful, methodical research, but through trial and error, wild experimentation, and a willingness to try things that rational scientists would consider insane. They blew up 3 research facilities and killed 17 scientists in the process. But they got results in secret shipyards hidden in Earth's oceans. In asteroid mining facilities hastily converted to military production, humanity built its counterattack fleet. They took captured Zevrathi technology and bolted it onto human spacecraft. They armed ships designed for peaceful exploration with weapons that violated every convention of civilized warfare. The result was a fleet of hybrid vessels that shouldn't have been able to fly, but they did. Meanwhile, a Zevrathi communications officer made a discovery. High Prelate, we've intercepted transmissions from the human resistance, and Ormic asked, they're communicating with other worlds in Dominion space. Ormic felt a chill run through him. What do you mean? The humans captured our navigation database in one of the early raids. The officer explained, they have the coordinates for every Dominion-controlled system. So what? Vormik said, they cannot reach those systems. They barely have interstellar capability, High Prelate, the officer said quietly. They're not trying to reach those systems. They're broadcasting to them. Warmick accessed the intercepted transmissions. What he saw made his blood run cold. The humans were sending messages to the subjugated species of the Dominion, showing them footage of human resistance, demonstrating that the Zevrathi could be fought, could be defeated. This is Earth, the transmission said in Galactic Standard. We are humans. We know you have suffered under Zevrathi rule. We know you want to be free. Watch what we do to our oppressors. Learn from us. We will show you that the Dominion can be beaten, and when we're done here, we're coming to help you, Warmick. Immediately ordered the transmissions jammed. But it was too late. The message had already spread across Dominion space. On a dozen conquered worlds, populations that had lived under Zevrathi control for generations watched in amazement. The humans were winning, actually winning. For the first time in 300 years, species throughout the Dominion felt something they had almost forgotten. Hope on Earth, General Chen addressed her command staff. Our counterattack begins in 72 hours, she said. We're going to hit them where they don't expect it, in space. Wormick received an urgent communication from Dominion High Command. Status report, High Prelate, the Supreme Commander demanded. The situation is complicated, Wormick admitted. Complicated? You have a full battle group. You should have conquered that primitive world in days. The humans are not fighting like other species, Wormick tried to explain. They use tactics we have never encountered. They sacrifice their own resources without hesitation. They learn impossibly fast. Are you telling me you cannot conquer one primitive world? Wormick wanted to say yes. He wanted to request permission to withdraw. But his pride wouldn't let him. I can conquer it, he said. I need reinforcements. There was a long silence. You will receive one additional battle group, the Supreme Commander finally said. But this is your last chance, High Prelate. Do not fail. The transmission ended. Wormick stared at the tactical display showing Earth. That small blue world had become his nightmare. And it was about to get worse in the orbital shipyards. The last of the human hybrid vessels completed final checks. They were ugly things, cobbled together from human and alien technology. But they were armed. They were crewed by volunteers who knew they probably wouldn't survive. And they were ready. Admiral James Park, formerly of the South Korean Navy, now commander of Earth's first interstellar combat fleet, gave the order, all ships, prepare for launch. Let's go introduce ourselves to our new neighbors. The stars had never seemed so threatening until the day they arrived. High Prelate Wormick stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, and watched the blue planet rotate slowly on his view screen. Earth, they called it, a primitive world, barely capable of faster-than-light communication, completely unaware of the vast empire that had just marked them for acquisition. Wormick had overseen 17 planetary conquests in his career. This would be his 18th. It should have been routine. Initial scans complete. High Prelate, his tactical officer reported, her crystalline features reflecting the soft glow of the control panels. Population approximately 8 billion. Multiple nation-states. No unified planetary government. Technology level is surprisingly advanced for their isolation. But still centuries behind our own, Wormick nodded, his mandibles clicking in satisfaction. A divided species was always easier to conquer. They would fight among themselves even as his forces descended. It was a pattern he had seen countless times before. Any significant military capabilities? He asked. Primitive kinetic weapons, chemical propulsion systems. Basic nuclear technology, the officer replied. Nothing that poses a threat to our shields. They have some presence in their orbital space. But their vessels are slow and poorly armed. Perfect, Warmick said. Initiate first contact protocols. Broadcast the terms of surrender in their dominant languages. Give them the standard 72 hours to comply. The message went out across all of Earth's communication frequencies. In hundreds of languages, the Zevrathi Dominion announced its presence. Humanity was to surrender immediately. Resistance would be met with pacification. Compliance would result in integration into the Dominion as a client species. Their technology, resources, and labor would serve the greater empire. It was generous, Warmick thought, more generous than many species deserved. On Earth, the message caused chaos in Beijing. Emergency meetings convened as military commanders tried to comprehend what they were seeing. In Washington, the president stared at the alien ships on satellite feeds. Her hands trembling. In Moscow, London, New Delhi, Tokyo, in every capital on Earth, leaders faced the impossible reality that they were no longer alone in the universe. And they were being threatened, but something unexpected happened in those first chaotic hours. The old enemies, the nations that had spent centuries fighting each other, began to talk, not through official channels at first, but through desperate military leaders who understood what was at stake. A general in the United States called his counterpart in China. "We need to work together," he said. "Yes," came the reply, in Europe. Old alliances solidified and expanded in Africa. Nations that had never cooperated began sharing intelligence. South America, Australia, every continent began to unite against the common threat. Within 24 hours, something unprecedented happened. Earth's nations formed an emergency coalition. They called it the Terran Defense Alliance. Every major military force on the planet fell under a unified command structure. Resources were pooled, secrets were shared, humanity, for the first time in its bloody history, spoke with one voice. Warmick received Earth's response exactly 60 hours after his initial broadcast. He expected the usual fearful acceptance or perhaps defiant bluster, followed by quick capitulation. Instead, he heard laughter. The transmission came from multiple points on Earth simultaneously. Broadcast on every frequency, the Zevrathi were monitoring. A simple message in clear, unaccented galactic standard. Someone on Earth had learned their language, and learned it fast. "Come and take it," the voice said, then the laughter again. Not from one person, but from thousands. Broadcasts from military bases, civilian centers, and even from the primitive spacecraft orbiting their planet. Warmick's mandibles spread in confusion. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded. His communications officer looked equally baffled. "It appears to be a rejection of our terms." "High prelate?" "Obviously," Warmick snapped. "But the laughter? What does it mean?" No one on his bridge had an answer. In 300 years of Dominion expansion, no species had ever responded to conquest with mockery, fear, yes, anger, certainly. Desperate attempts at negotiation, always but amusement? Never. "Perhaps they do not understand the situation," his tactical officer suggested. "Perhaps they believe we are not serious. Then we will educate them," Warmick said. "Deploy the advanced forces. Target their military installations. Show them what defiance costs." The Zevrathi fleet moved into Earth's orbit with practiced precision. Massive carriers, disgorged landing craft, bombardment vessels took up positions over major cities. Fighter squadrons screamed through Earth's atmosphere, their shields glowing as they descended. The invasion of Earth had begun on the ground. Humanity watched the alien ships descend in military bunkers deep underground. Commanders gave their final orders in cities around the world. Civilians who had never held weapons were handed rifles and shown how to load them in laboratories. Scientists worked frantically to understand the fragments of Zevrathi technology they had intercepted. And in a secret command center beneath the Swiss Alps, the leader of the Terran Defense Alliance addressed his species. General Sarah Chen had been chosen not because she was the highest-ranking officer on Earth, but because she had spent her career studying asymmetric warfare, how small forces could defeat larger ones, how the weak could triumph over the strong. "They think we're primitive," she said to the assembled commanders on the video call. Representatives from every nation on Earth watched her. They think because we don't have their shields and they're faster than light drives that we'll just roll over." She smiled. And it was not a kind smile. "They have no idea what humans are capable of when we're angry." "We don't fight fair," she continued. "We don't fight with honor. We fight to win. And we use every advantage we have. They're coming to take our home," she said. "Let's show them why that was a mistake." Around the world, her words were translated and broadcast. Soldiers heard them, civilians heard them, and humanity prepared to teach the Zevrothi Dominion a lesson they would never forget. In orbit, Warmick watched his forces deploy with satisfaction. By this time tomorrow, he thought, the humans would be begging for terms by next week. Earth would be just another conquered world. Another jewel in the Dominion's crown. He had no idea how wrong he was. The first landing craft touched down in the Gobi Desert. Chosen for its remote location and tactical value, the Zevrothi soldiers emerged, confident in their superior armor and weapons. They never saw the humans coming. Hidden in the sand, covered in thermal camouflage, the Chinese special forces waited until the aliens were completely exposed. Then they opened fire, not with primitive kinetic weapons, but with everything humanity had developed in centuries of killing each other. Shaped charges that had been designed to penetrate tank armor tore through Zevrothi shields. Electromagnetic pulse weapons scrambled their communications. And when the aliens tried to retreat to their landing craft, they found the ground beneath them had been mined. The explosions lit up the desert night. Warmick stared at his tactical display in disbelief as the first landing force's signals winked out one by one. "What happened?" he demanded, unknown. "Hi, Prelate," came the panicked response. They're gone. Send another force," Warmick ordered. Double the size, full combat protocols, but as the second wave descended, the same thing happened. And the third, around the world, the pattern repeated. In every location, the Zevrothi tried to establish a foothold. Humanity was waiting. Not fighting in open battle where the aliens' superior technology could dominate, but ambushing, sabotaging, and vanishing before the enemy could respond. Earth's military had spent thousands of years perfecting the art of war. The Zevrothi were about to get a very painful education in his command ship. Warmick realized something that sent a chill through his alien physiology. This was not going to be easy. This might not even be quick. For the first time in his long career, High Prelate Warmick felt something he had never experienced in conquest before: doubt.